Hi, 58F. Never imagined that a single suitcase could change my entire life. When Clara showed up at my door that rainy Tuesday afternoon with just one small bag, I thought nothing of it. She said she needed a place to stay for a week while their apartment was being fumigated. My son David stood beside her, giving me that same puppy dog look he'd perfected when he was 5 years old and wanted an extra cookie. How could I say no to my only child and his wife? That was 6 months ago. Now, as I sit in what used to be my favorite reading chair, which Clara has moved 3 times and reupholstered in a fabric I hate, I realize that week never ended. She rules my house now, and I'm nothing more than an unwelcome guest in the home I've owned for 30 years. It started so innocently that I almost feel foolish for not seeing the signs. Clara walked through my front door with that tiny suitcase, barely big enough to hold a week's worth of clothes. She hugged me warmly and thanked me over and over for letting them stay. David carried in a few more bags, mostly his work clothes and laptop. They set up in the guest room, and I was happy to have the company. Living alone since my husband passed 5 years ago had been an adjustment, and having my son around again felt like old times. Clara immediately offered to help with dinner that first night. She chopped vegetables while I seasoned the roast, and we chatted about their apartment troubles. She seemed so sweet and grateful. By the third day, things began to shift in ways I didn't immediately recognize as problems. Clara started making breakfast before I woke up. When I came downstairs, she'd already prepared something completely different from my usual toast and coffee. "I made you a green smoothie and quinoa bowl," she announced proudly. "It's so much healthier than all that bread you eat." I thanked her politely and tried to eat it, though the taste made my stomach turn. She watched me carefully as I forced down each bite. The next morning, she did it again, and the next. Soon, she was making all the meals, and my simple preferences disappeared entirely. The kitchen became her domain within that first week. She reorganized my spice rack because mine didn't make sense. She threw out my favorite coffee creamer because it had too many chemicals. She replaced my comfortable old dish towels with new ones. Cares. Grateful for having my choices taken away in my own home, but I bit my tongue because I didn't want to cause problems. They were only staying for a week after all. Except the week ended, and they didn't leave. When I asked about their apartment, Clara's eyes filled with tears. "The fumigation didn't work," she said. "They found more bugs." "We might need a few more days." David hugged her and shot me a look that said I better not push the issue. Those few more days turned into weeks. Clara's control spread from the kitchen to the living room. She didn't like how I had arranged the furniture. "It blocks the natural flow of the space," she declared one day while I was at my doctor's appointment. When I came home, my couch was against a different wall, my coffee table was in the corner, and my grandmother's rocking chair had been moved to the basement. "Doesn't it feel more open now?" she asked with a bright smile. I wanted to scream that it felt wrong, that I'd arranged things exactly how I liked them, but David was nodding along enthusiastically. "It does look better, Mom. Clara has such a good eye for design." The comments about my house became constant. The curtains were outdated. The carpet was the wrong color. The bathroom needed new fixtures. Each observation came with a sad little sigh, as if she was personally offended by my choices. She started ordering things online without asking me. Packages arrived daily with new throw pillows, wall art, and decorative objects I never wanted. She hung them up while I was out, and when I protested, she'd tear up. "I'm just trying to make this place feel more like home," she'd say. "Since we're here so much, I thought you wouldn't mind." David always took her side. "She's not hurting anything, Mom. Let her express herself." Express herself? This was my house, bought with my late husband's life insurance money, maintained with my teacher's pension, filled with memories of raising David and celebrating 35 years of marriage. Every piece of furniture had a story. The slightly faded armchair was where I nursed David as a baby. The dining table with the scratch on top was where my husband helped David with homework every night. The kitchen cabinets I'd painted myself when we couldn't afford renovations. But none of that mattered to Clara. She saw my home as a project, something glared at me. "How can you be so heartless, Mom? We're family." I thought you enjoyed having us here. The guilt ate at me for days. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe this was what family did for each other. So I let it continue, even as Clara's control tightened. She started doing my laundry, mixing my delicates with the regular wash and shrinking my favorite sweater. She answered my phone when it rang, telling my friends I was busy and she'd take a message. She even started opening my mail, claiming she was trying to help me stay organized. When my friend Janet called to ask why I'd been so distant lately, I realized Clara had been screening my social life too. "Your friends are lovely," Clara had said, "but some of them are a bit negative. You don't need that energy." The food situation became unbearable. Clara announced one morning that we were all going on a family diet to get healthier together. She cleaned out my pantry and refrigerator, throwing away everything I loved. My chocolate stash? Gone. The ice cream I ate while watching my shows? Gone. The crackers I snacked on, the cheese I loved, the wine I enjoyed with dinner, all gone. She replaced them with things I couldn't pronounce and didn't want to eat. Kale chips, kombucha, something called nutritional yeast that tasted like feet. When I protested, she patted my hand. "You'll thank me when you have more energy and feel better." But I didn't feel better. I felt trapped and miserable. My own home had become a prison where I couldn't eat what I wanted, sit where I wanted, or live how I wanted. Every morning I woke up to Clara's schedule. Yoga at 6, which she insisted I join. Breakfast at 7, always something green and tasteless. Then she'd outline the day's activities, which usually involved her redecorating another room or implementing another lifestyle change. I started spending more time in my bedroom, the only space she hadn't completely taken over. Even there, she'd knock constantly, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I wanted to join her for whatever wellness activity she'd discovered online. David had changed too. My sweet, thoughtful son now parroted everything Clara said. When I complained about the food, he'd lecture me about nutrition. When I said I missed my old friend, "And I are paying for it as our gift to you." A gift? Destroying my kitchen without permission was a gift? The contractors worked for 2 weeks, and the result was a sterile white space that looked like a hospital. Gone were my warm wooden cabinets, replaced with cold metal ones. My cozy breakfast nook became a modern bar with uncomfortable stools. Even the window where I'd grown herbs for 20 years was covered with a modern treatment that blocked the light. I cried myself to sleep that night, muffling my sobs in my pillow so they wouldn't hear. The next morning, Clara knocked on my door early. "We need to talk about your bedroom," she said. "It really doesn't match the rest of the house now." I finally snapped. "This is my bedroom in my house," I said firmly. "You're not touching it." Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed. "I'm only trying to help," she said coldly. "But if you want to live in the past, that's your choice." She didn't speak to me for 3 days, and David treated me like I'd committed a crime. The silence was almost worse than her constant interference. When Clara finally started talking to me again, she acted like nothing had happened. But I noticed new changes. She'd installed a smart home system without telling me, so now she could control the lights, temperature, and even the door locks from her phone. She set up cameras in the common areas, for security, she said, but I knew she was monitoring my movements. She programmed the thermostat to her preferences, and when I tried to change it, I discovered she'd locked me out of the system. My own home's temperature was no longer under my control. The financial situation became concerning too. Clara started receiving packages constantly, all charged to my address. When I questioned it, she said she'd paid me back through David, but I never saw any money. My credit card bills showed purchases I didn't make, store cards opened in my name that I didn't authorize. When I confronted David, he said I was being paranoid and that Clara would never do something like that. "You're getting older, Mom," he said. "Maybe you're forgetting things." The gaslighting was so effective that I actually started to doubt myself. Was I forgetting? Was I being unreasonable? 6 months after that first day with the single suitcase, Clara dropped the biggest bomb yet. We were eating dinner. Another one of her pounding so hard I thought I might have a heart attack right there at my own dinner table. Clara continued chattering about her plans, how she'd convert my craft room into a walk-in closet, how they'd take over the larger bathroom, how eventually they'd need space for children. Children. In my house. Being raised by Clara with her rules and her diets and her complete dismissal of everything I valued, I excused myself and went to my room, where I sat on my bed trying to process what was happening. They were selling their apartment. They were never leaving. This was no longer my home. It was theirs, and I was just an old woman in the way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house like a ghost, seeing all the changes Clara had made. The walls were different colors. The furniture was rearranged or replaced. The kitchen was unrecognizable. Even the smell was different, some essential oil diffuser she'd installed that gave me headaches. This wasn't my home anymore. It was Clara's kingdom, and she ruled it with an iron fist wrapped in a smile and fake tears. I stood in what used to be my husband's study, now converted into Clara's yoga studio, and felt a rage building inside me that I'd never experienced before. The next few days were torture. Clara walked around like she owned the place, because essentially, she did. She made plans with contractors to renovate the upstairs. She ordered more furniture. She threw out more of my things, claiming she was decluttering and that I had too much stuff. My photo albums ended up in the basement. My husband's collection of vintage books vanished, donated to charity without my permission. She even got rid of my cat's favorite bed, replacing it with something modern that poor Whiskers refused to use. When I protested any of it, she'd cry and David would comfort her while looking at me like I was a monster. The breaking point came a week later. I'd gone to my sister's house for an afternoon, needing escape from my own home. When I returned earlier than expected, I heard Clara and David in the kitchen. They were on speakerphone with someone, and Clara was laughing. "It was so easy," she said. "I just took over bit by bit, and she never even fought back. She's completely clueless. We'll have this whole place to ourselves soon enough. I'm thinking I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for was congratulating his wife on manipulating me out of my own home. Something inside me snapped. Not broke, but snapped back into place. The fog of guilt and confusion lifted, and I saw everything clearly for the first time in 6 months. This wasn't about being a good mother or helping family. This was about 2 con artists who'd identified an easy mark and executed a perfect takeover. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed I would always be the pushover they thought I was. They'd forgotten that I was the woman who'd raised David alone after my husband died, who'd worked 2 jobs to put him through college, who'd survived loss and heartache and come out stronger. They'd mistaken kindness for weakness, and that was going to be their downfall. I spent the next week planning carefully. I acted normal, let Clara continue her reign of terror while I gathered information. I discovered she'd been intercepting my mail to hide the credit card bills for all her purchases. She'd been telling my friends I was showing signs of dementia when they called, which explained why so many had stopped reaching out. She'd even called my doctor's office to discuss my concerning behavior, laying groundwork for their assisted living plan. But she'd been sloppy, too. The credit cards were fraud. The contractor work wasn't permitted. And most importantly, the house was still in my name alone. I waited for the perfect moment. Clara and David had planned a weekend trip to visit her parents and show off their soon-to-be-sold apartment one last time. They left Friday morning, Clara reminding me about my new medication schedule she'd created and the meal prep she'd done for me. I smiled and waved goodbye, then immediately got to work. I'd hired a moving company for Saturday morning, paying extra for a rush job. I'd consulted with a lawyer about my rights. I'd opened a new bank account and transferred my money. I was ready. The movers arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. I directed them to pack everything that wasn't originally mine. Clara's yoga equipment, her modern furniture, her kitchen appliances, her clothes, her art. Everything she'd brought into my home. David's things, too. Every last item. It took 6 hours and 3 trucks, but by afternoon, my house was starting to look familiar again. I had the movers take everything to... My grandmother's rocking chair returned to its corner. The kitchen was harder since she'd renovated it, but I removed all her gadgets and organizational systems, bringing back my familiar clutter. I couldn't undo the construction, but I could make it mine again. I even found my husband's books in boxes in the basement and returned them to his study, which I converted back from Clara's yoga studio. The locks were changed by Saturday evening. The smart home system was disabled and removed. The cameras were taken down. I called the credit card companies and reported the fraud, providing documentation that I hadn't authorized the charges. I sent a formal eviction notice to their apartment, even though they'd sold it, creating a paper trail. I texted David a simple message: "Your week is up. Your belongings are at your apartment building. Do not return to my house." Then I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of the good wine Clara had tried to throw away, but I'd hidden in the basement. Sunday afternoon, they returned. I watched from my window as their car pulled up. Clara got out first, her face confused as she tried to use her key. David joined her, and they both stood at my door, keys not working, calling my name. I sat in my rocking chair, whiskers purring in my lap, and didn't move. They rang the doorbell repeatedly. They called my phone, which was still off. Finally, David tried the smart home app, which no longer worked. I heard Clara shriek in frustration. They pounded on the door, demanding I let them in. The neighbors started noticing, and I knew they were embarrassed. Finally, I walked to the door but didn't open it. "Your week is up," I called through the wood. "This is my house. Your belongings are at your apartment building's lobby." Clara started screaming about calling the police. I'd prepared for this. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "I have documentation of fraud, identity theft, and harassment. I have recordings of you admitting to manipulating me. I have witnesses to your abuse. Please, call them." There was silence on the other side. They knew I wasn't bluffing. The security cameras she'd installed had recorded audio too, and I'd saved everything before removing them. David tried emotional manipulation next. "Mom, please. I'm your son. How can you do this to me?" Manipulate. "But you're not doing it to me anymore." I heard them arguing with each other, Clara blaming David for not handling me better, David snapping back that it was her idea. The unity they'd shown while controlling me crumbled the moment things got difficult. Eventually, I heard their car doors slam and the engine start. They drove away, and I finally opened my door to breathe the fresh air of my own freedom. The next few days were chaotic. They tried everything to get back in. David sent long, guilt-tripping texts about how I was destroying our family. Clara left voicemails threatening legal action. They showed up several more times, but I never answered the door. They tried to get their things from the apartment building, but the new owners had already complained about the pile of belongings blocking the lobby. Since Clara and David no longer owned the apartment and weren't residents, the building management wouldn't let them in to retrieve anything. They'd have to coordinate with the new owners, who were furious about the mess and not inclined to be helpful. My friends rallied around me when I finally told them what had been happening. Janet was horrified that Clara had been screening my calls. Linda couldn't believe I'd endured 6 months of this treatment. They helped me file proper legal documentation to ensure Clara and David couldn't return. I got a restraining order after providing evidence of the fraud and harassment. The credit card companies reversed most of the charges after their investigation. I even managed to get some money back from the contractors for the unpermitted work, though the kitchen remained an expensive reminder of my temporary weakness. David tried reaching out through my sister, begging her to convince me to let them come back. She laughed in his face. "You made your bed," she told him. "Your mother gave you everything, and you let your wife treat her like garbage in her own home. You're lucky she didn't press criminal charges." He cried to her about having nowhere to go. No money after selling the apartment and spending it on Clara's renovations and shopping. My sister showed no sympathy. Neither did I. They'd planned to push me into assisted living. They deserved whatever hardship came their way. 2 weeks after I kicked them out, I got a call from the apartment building. Clara and David had been trying to break in to get their belongings. The police were called, and since they no longer had any legal right to be there, they were arrested for trespassing. Their things were eventually town, the only place they could afford with their ruined credit and no references. Clara had to take a second job to pay bills. David lost his job after the stress affected his performance. Their relationship crumbled under the pressure of actual hardship, without my house to cushion their lives and my money to fund their desires. Within 6 months, I heard they'd separated. Clara moved back to her parents, tail between her legs. David lived in his car for a while before a cousin took pity on him. Did I feel guilty? Number. They'd shown no mercy to me, so I showed none to them. They'd laughed about me being pathetic and clueless. They'd planned to steal my home and dump me in assisted living. They'd manipulated, gaslit, and abused me for 6 months, assuming I was too weak to fight back. They learned that even the kindest person has a breaking point, and when pushed past it, we're capable of anything. My home was mine again, filled with my memories, my choices, my life. I could eat what I wanted, sit where I wanted, live how I wanted. I redecorated the kitchen myself, making it warmer and more personal despite Clara's structural changes. I planted a new garden where she'd tried to install a meditation space. I adopted another cat, a friend for Whiskers, something Clara had forbidden because she claimed to be allergic. I reconnected with my friends, who were amazed by my transformation from doormat to warrior. I even started dating a nice man from my book club, something that would have been impossible under Clara's controlling watch. The restraining order meant David couldn't contact me for a year. When it expired, he sent a letter. Not an apology, but more guilt-tripping about how I'd ruined his life. I threw it in the fire without finishing it. He'd made his choices. He'd chosen Clara over me, chosen manipulation over respect, chosen greed over family. Now he was living with those choices. I felt no obligation to save him from consequences he'd created. Some might say I was cruel, but I called it justice. My therapist, who I started seeing after everything happened, helped me understand that I hadn't been weak. I'd been conditioned by society to put family first, to sacrifice for my children, to keep the peace. Clara had weaponized those I couldn't save him from himself. The house felt different now. Not just because I'd restored it, but because I was different. I was no longer the woman who'd opened her door to that single suitcase 6 months ago. I was stronger, harder, less trusting. Some might see that as sad, but I saw it as growth. I'd learned that kindness without boundaries is just weakness, that family can betray you worse than strangers, and that sometimes the only way to win is to fight dirty. Clara had taught me those lessons, and I'd been an excellent student. My sister asked if I'd ever forgive David. I told her forgiveness was for people who showed remorse. David had shown none. He was only sorry he'd been caught and stopped, not sorry for what he'd done. Until he truly understood the pain he'd caused and genuinely apologized, there was nothing to forgive. And even then, forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. He'd broken something that could never be fully repaired. The son I'd loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd conspired to destroy me. The neighborhood had watched the drama unfold, and opinions were divided. Some thought I was heartless for kicking out my own son. Others applauded me for standing up for myself. I didn't care what they thought. They hadn't lived through 6 months of psychological torture disguised as help. They hadn't heard their own child laughing about their weakness. They hadn't watched their home be transformed into someone else's domain while being made to feel guilty for objecting. Their opinions meant nothing because they'd never walked in my shoes. Clara tried to contact me once, about 8 months after I'd kicked them out. She left a voicemail saying she forgave me for what I'd done to them. She forgave me. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd invaded my home, spent my money, tried to steal my house, planned to put me in assisted living. And she forgave me? I saved that voicemail as a reminder of her narcissism. It helped on days when I wondered if I'd been too harsh. Hearing her entitled voice reminded me that I'd done exactly what needed to be done. People asked how I could be so calculating in my revenge. The truth was, they'd taught me.
Every manipulation Clara performed, every lie she told, every tear she manufactured had been a lesson. When I found
Gift to them. A reminder that actions have consequences, and that even the weakest victim can become the strongest adversary. My house became my sanctuary again. Every morning I woke up in my own bed, walked to my own kitchen, and made my own breakfast choices. No green smoothies or quinoa bowls unless I wanted them. No yoga at dawn or meditation sessions. No essential oil diffusers giving me headaches. No cameras watching my every move. No locks I couldn't control. Just me, living my life on my terms in my space. The freedom was intoxicating after months of oppression. I started hosting dinner parties again, something Clara had stopped because she said my cooking was unhealthy. My friends loved coming over, bringing wine she would have forbidden, eating foods she would have banned, laughing at volumes she would have criticized. My home was filled with joy again, the kind that comes from genuine connection, not the performative happiness Clara had demanded. Every gathering was a celebration of my freedom and a middle finger to her memory. The garden bloomed like never before once I removed Clara's structured plans and geometric designs. Plants grew wild and free, the way I liked them. The tree she'd wanted to remove thrived, providing shade and beauty. Birds returned to feeders she'd called unsanitary. The backyard became a testament to natural beauty over controlled perfection. Even nature seemed to celebrate her absence, growing more vibrant without her interference. I found things she'd hidden throughout the house for months after they left. My mother's jewelry box in the attic, likely waiting to be sold. Photo albums she'd claimed to have donated stuffed behind the water heater. My husband's watch in her drawer, which I discovered when I finally cleaned out the guest room properly. Each discovery renewed my anger and justified my actions. She hadn't just been controlling, she'd been stealing, piece by piece, erasing my history to replace it with hers. David reached out one more time, 2 years after I'd kicked them out. He'd gotten married again, to someone else, and wanted to introduce his new wife. He thought enough time had passed that I'd welcome him back. I met them at a restaurant, curious about this new woman. She seemed nice enough, nothing like Clara. But when David went to the bathroom, she leaned in and whispered, "He told me what you did to him and Clara. I want you to know I see right energy trying to save anyone else." The best revenge wasn't just reclaiming my house. It was living well without them. Every happy moment I had was a victory. Every peaceful morning was a triumph. Every choice I made for myself was a celebration. They'd tried to break me, but instead, they'd forged me into something stronger. I wasn't grateful for the experience, but I was grateful for the outcome. I'd discovered my own strength, my own worth, and my own capacity for ruthlessness when pushed too far. Sometimes at night, I sat in my restored living room, Whiskers and her friend's shadow purring beside me, and remembered that phone conversation. "She's completely clueless," Clara had laughed. "She's pathetic." Those words had shattered my heart, but also freed me. They'd shown me who they really were beneath the tears and manipulation. They'd revealed that their love was conditional, their respect non-existent, and their intentions purely selfish. That knowledge had given me permission to be equally ruthless in return. My story spread through social circles and family networks. Some relatives criticized me for being too harsh. They said family should forgive, that I should have found a compromise. I asked them if they'd like to experience 6 months of what I went through and then talk about compromise. None took me up on the offer. It was easy to preach forgiveness when you hadn't been the one suffering. Easy to talk about family bonds when yours hadn't been weaponized against you. Clara's parents eventually reached out, asking if I could tell them my side of the story. They'd only heard Clara's version, where she was an innocent victim of a crazy mother-in-law who'd thrown them out for no reason. I met them for coffee and showed them my evidence. The credit card fraud, the recorded conversations, the testimony from friends about how she'd isolated me. They left that meeting in tears, finally understanding who their daughter really was. They apologized profusely, but I told them it wasn't their fault. Clara had fooled everyone, including me, for a very long time. The house stood as a monument to my victory.
Every room told the story of my liberation. The kitchen she'd modernized, but I'd personalized. The living room she'd rearranged, but I'd restored. The garden she'd structured, but I'd freed. Even the guest room, which I'd turned destroyed, and she ended up alone, exactly as she deserved. David's descent was slower but equally complete. The new marriage failed when his wife realized the victim story didn't match reality. His career never recovered from the instability. Friends distanced themselves as his true nature became apparent. He reached out to relatives for help, but word had spread about what he'd done to me. Family bonds only stretch so far when you've shown yourself capable of such cruelty. He learned that betraying your mother for your wife's schemes leaves you with neither mother nor wife in the end. 3 years passed before I felt truly healed from the experience. The house was completely mine again, filled with new memories that overshadowed the bad ones. I traveled to places Clara had said were wastes of money. I ate foods she'd banned. I wore clothes she'd criticized. I lived exactly as I wanted, answering to no one, compromising for no one. The freedom was intoxicating and worth every difficult decision I'd made to achieve it. My therapist said I'd undergone a complete transformation. The woman who'd welcomed Clara with open arms was gone, replaced by someone who understood boundaries, recognized manipulation, and valued herself enough to fight back. I wasn't bitter, just wiser. I wasn't cruel, just careful. I wasn't heartless, just protected. The walls I'd built weren't to keep everyone out, just those who'd proven they couldn't be trusted. And that included my own son. A reality that still hurt but no longer destroyed me. Friends marveled at my strength, but I told them it wasn't strength that saved me. It was rage. Pure, righteous rage at being treated like nothing in my own home. That rage had burned through the guilt, the manipulation, the false obligations. It had given me clarity and courage when I needed it most. Anger, I learned, wasn't always destructive. Sometimes it was the only thing that could save you from those who claimed to love you while destroying you piece by piece. The single suitcase had been a lie from the beginning. I found out later that Clara had planned the takeover for months. She'd researched me, learned my weaknesses, identified my vulnerabilities. The fumigation story was fake. The tears were rehearsed. Every move was calculated to get her foot in my door and then gradually push me out.
Victory wasn't just personal. It was a warning to others who might try the same thing. Word spread through the community about what had happened. Other elderly parents reached out, sharing similar stories, asking for advice. I became an unexpected advocate for those being exploited by their children and their partners. I shared my story freely, hoping others would recognize the signs before it was too late. If my pain could prevent someone else's, then it had served a purpose. The house itself seemed happier now. The walls had witnessed my humiliation and my triumph. They'd seen me at my lowest and highest points. If houses could talk, mine would tell a story of resilience and revenge, of a woman who'd been pushed to the edge and chose to push back instead of falling. Every room held memories of both my suffering and my strength. The balance had shifted, though. The good memories now outweighed the bad, and new ones were being created every day. People sometimes asked if I regretted being so harsh. I asked them if they'd regret saving their own life, because that's what I'd done. Clara and David hadn't just wanted my house. They'd wanted to erase me entirely, to reduce me to nothing more than an inconvenience to be managed and eventually discarded. Fighting back wasn't cruel. It was survival. And survivors don't apologize for doing what's necessary to survive, especially not to those who tried to destroy them. The restraining order expired again, but neither David nor Clara attempted contact. They'd learned their lesson, understanding that I was no longer an easy target. The woman who'd opened her door to that single suitcase was gone, replaced by someone who'd never be fooled again. I'd paid a high price for that wisdom, losing my son and my innocence about family bonds. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could protect myself against anyone, even those who shared my blood. My sister once said she was proud of me for fighting back. She'd watched me suffer for months, wanting to intervene but knowing I had to find my own strength.
When I finally did, she said it was like watching a phoenix rise from ashes. Dramatic, perhaps, but accurate. Clara had burned down everything I thought I knew about myself and my family. From those ashes, I'd built something stronger, something that couldn't be destroyed by tears and manipulation. The new me didn't
Colors Clara would have hated. I've filled rooms with things she would have called clutter, but I call treasures. I've created a space that reflects exactly who I am, not who someone else thought I should be. Every decision is mine alone, and that freedom never gets old. The house is truly mine in every sense, not just legally, but spiritually. I heard recently that David had tried to reconnect with other family members, spinning his tale of victimhood. But my story had traveled farther and faster than his lies. Cousins, aunts, uncles, they all knew what he'd done. Some had even experienced similar manipulation from him on a smaller scale, asking for money with sob stories, trying to move in temporarily during hard times. My experience had opened their eyes to his patterns, and they'd closed their doors before he could get his foot in them. The irony wasn't lost on me. Clara had wanted my house so badly she'd destroyed her own life to get it. David had chosen her schemes over his mother's love and ended up with neither. They'd had everything they needed, a place to stay when they genuinely needed help, a loving family member willing to support them. But that wasn't enough. They'd wanted complete control, total domination, and in reaching for everything, they'd lost it all. The ancient Greeks would have called it hubris. I just called it karma. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't overheard that phone conversation. Would I have eventually been pushed into assisted living as they planned? Would I have died thinking my son loved me when he actually saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to free housing? The thought chilled me, but also strengthened my resolve. That accidental discovery had saved my life in more ways than one. It had shown me the truth when I needed it most, giving me the power to fight back before it was too late. My home now hosted regular gatherings of what I called the Survivors Club, women and men who'd experienced similar exploitation by family members. We shared stories, strategies, and strength. We learned to recognize the signs early, to set boundaries firmly, and to fight back when necessary. Clara had unknowingly created a network of people who would never be victims again. Her manipulation tactics had become our teaching tools, warning others about the dangers of toxic family members. The guest room that had started this whole nightmare was now my favorite room in the house. I'd painted it a vibrant yellow. Was my happiness. Every day I lived well was a day that proved they'd failed to destroy me. Every laugh with friends, every peaceful morning, every choice I made for myself was a victory. They'd tried to steal my life, but I'd taken it back with interest. The woman they'd called pathetic and clueless had outsmarted them completely. That truth probably burned more than any legal judgment or financial consequence. I kept one photo from that time, hidden in a drawer. It showed the three of us at dinner about a month into their stay, before I'd fully understood what was happening. Clara was smiling at the camera while her hand rested possessively on my kitchen counter. David had his arm around her, looking at her with adoration instead of at me. I looked tired and confused, already being pushed to the margins of my own life. I kept it as a reminder to never ignore my instincts again. The signs had been there in that photo, if only I'd known how to read them. My lawyer had said I had grounds for serious criminal charges beyond the fraud: harassment, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. But I'd decided the civil consequences were enough. They'd lost their home, their relationships, their reputations, and their victim. Putting them in jail would have just given them another excuse to play martyrs. Instead, I let them live with the consequences of their choices, struggling in the real world without someone else's house to cushion their fall. The neighborhood had watched my transformation with amazement. The quiet widow who'd barely been seen outside her garden had become a force to be reckoned with. I walked taller, spoke louder, and took up space in a way I never had before. Clara had tried to make me smaller until I disappeared. Instead, she'd forced me to become bigger than I'd ever imagined possible. The neighbors who'd once pitied me now respected me. Some even feared me a little, and I was okay with that. Winter came again, the first one in years where I controlled my own thermostat.
I kept the house exactly as warm as I wanted, not a degree cooler or warmer than my preference. Such a small thing, but it represented everything. The ability to decide my own comfort in my own home. Clara had controlled even the air I breathed, but now every breath was my own. I sat by my fireplace, burning wood she would have called inefficient.
Acceptance. I accepted that my son was gone, replaced by someone I didn't know and couldn't trust. I accepted that family could be the enemy. I accepted that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to destroy those trying to destroy you. It wasn't the peace I'd wanted, but it was the peace I'd earned. And in my reclaimed home, surrounded by my choices and my memories, it was enough. The single suitcase sits in my basement now. Clara had left it behind in her rush to pack everything else. I thought about throwing it away, but kept it as a trophy. It reminded me that the biggest threats often come in the smallest packages, that sometimes the most dangerous person is the one you invite in willingly, that a suitcase meant for a week can contain plans to steal your entire life. But most importantly, it reminded me that I'd won. Against all odds, against my own son, against every manipulation and scheme, I'd won. My house is mine, my life is mine, my choices are mine. And anyone who tries to take them away again will learn what Clara and David learned the hard way. The woman they meet at the door might look like an easy mark, a lonely widow eager for company. But underneath that exterior is someone who's been tested by fire and came out forged in steel. Someone who knows every manipulation tactic because she's survived them all. Someone who will never, ever be a victim again. The morning sun streams through windows I chose to keep uncovered, despite Clara's insistence on privacy curtains. My breakfast is whatever I want it to be. My day stretches ahead with no mandatory yoga or meditation or wellness activities I never asked for. The house hums with the quiet contentment of a space truly owned by its occupant. No hidden cameras watch me. No smart home systems control me. No unwanted residents rule me. This is freedom, hard-won and fiercely protected. Sometimes I walk through each room, touching things Clara tried to throw away, sitting in chairs she tried to remove, eating foods she tried to ban. It's a ritual of ownership, a daily reminder that I survived her attempted coup. The house bears some scars from her occupation, like the too modern kitchen, but I've made even those spaces mine. Every plant she would have called messy, every photo she would have hidden, every comfortable old thing she would have refused to be erased. They tell my story at gatherings, a cautionary tale for those too trusting, and an inspiration for those being exploited. I never thought I'd become this person, someone others looked to for strength. But Clara and David created this version of me through their cruelty. In trying to destroy me, they built me into someone indestructible. The legal bills are all paid now. The credit cards are clear of fraudulent charges. The house is fully restored to my vision. The restraining orders have expired, but they're no longer needed. Clara and David know better than to come near me again. They learned that the person they dismissed as pathetic and clueless was actually neither. I was just kind, until they gave me reason not to be. Now they know what I'm capable of when pushed, and that knowledge keeps them far away. 5 years later, and I sleep peacefully every night. No anxiety about what new change Clara will impose tomorrow. No worry about what David and she are planning behind my back. No fear that I'll wake up to find more of my life stolen. The security I feel isn't just from new locks and legal documents. It's from knowing my own strength, understanding my own worth, and trusting my own judgment. They gave me those gifts by trying to take everything else. The house stands strong, a testament to survival and victory. Every brick that sheltered their betrayal now protects my peace. Every room that witnessed their cruelty now holds my joy. Every door they walked through with evil intentions now opens only for those I truly welcome. This isn't just a house anymore. It's a fortress of my own making, defended by hard-won wisdom and protected by the knowledge that I'll never be fooled again. If Clara and David thought they were moving in for just a week, they were the clueless ones. They revealed their true selves, thinking I was too weak to respond. They plotted against me, thinking I was too stupid to discover it. They laughed at me,
thinking I was too pathetic to fight back. Every assumption they made was wrong, and those wrong assumptions cost them everything. Meanwhile, I paid a price for my education in human cruelty, but what I gained in return was worth it. My story doesn't end with reconciliation because not all stories should. Sometimes the ending is about standing firm in your decision to protect yourself. Sometimes it's about choosing your own well-being over family expectations. Sometimes it's about recognizing
Clara tried to eliminate. Shadow plays with a toy Clara would have called clutter. The afternoon sun warms rooms arranged exactly how I like them. This is my life, in my house, on my terms. And if anyone ever again shows up with a single suitcase and a sob story, they'll find the door firmly closed. Because I learned the hard way that when someone says they're staying for just a week, you better make sure they mean it. And if they don't, you better be prepared to fight for what's yours. I wasn't prepared the first time, but I promise you, I'll never be unprepared again. My house, my rules, my life. Forever.